What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Another Space Marine 2 video here, but this time for the ROG Ally X. And I've really been enjoying this game in general. Been playing it a lot on PC, on GeForce Now at max settings on their 4080, streaming in the cloud, and a good bit here on the Ally X locally as well. Mostly 720p, messing around with 900p, 1080p and stuff here and there. We'll take a look at a lot of different stuff here in the video and what kind of performance I'm seeing here with all official drivers and updates here on the device. As far as settings go, it's not too robust in here, and we don't have FSR3 or in-game frame generation like over on Wukong, Black Myth, or anything, which is unfortunate. We'll talk more about that in the video, but we're also going to mess with low and medium in the video, 720p, 900p, and a quick look at 1080. But let's go ahead and get into it and look at some of the performance here. Now, 720p, low preset FSR2 on quality, 25 watts, 8 gigs of VRAM here on the Ally. About 32 FPS staying still in this one area. If we go to FSR2 balanced, we'll gain 1 or 2 FPS, which is pretty typical for these games when we do that. And if we go to performance, we'll gain like 1 more FPS out of that. I'm not so sure it's really worth it. I think I'd be sticking with quality or balanced in this one, and I'll mostly be doing quality. You could get away with native. Maybe you'll use a little RIS or something in AMD, but I'm going to stay away from that in this video as well and pretty much use some FSR2 because it does help me with little FPS, and many areas of this game are tough to run. Now, medium looks really good here over low, even at 720p, but it does get tough to run as well. But you can certainly do a mix of low and medium settings, which we'll look at later on in the video in some recommended settings. Now, if we wanted to go into 900p, 900p low preset is very similar to the performance that you would get at 720p medium, and we'll take a closer look at that as well. And 1080p I had mentioned, I'm really just kind of staying away from in this video because just like the Legion Go, when you start getting above that 720, 800p, 900p, it gets kind of unplayable. And side by side here, you see the low preset, medium preset, 720, then the 900p there. And you can see what I mean about performance being very similar between the 900p low versus the 720p medium, but there's some room to play around with the settings there. Again, we'll take a closer look at that later on when we get into the video, but the most we're going to squeeze out of this is really at the 720p low with some FSR, some other tricks in there. I'm really not getting into any frame gen with this one since we don't have in-game in the driver level for AMD in this one, and I'm also not messing with lossless scaling yet in this one, and with the base FPS being so low, there's only so much it's going to help, but we'll take a look at that in a future video. Now, in combat, there are areas that are going to suffer the most. I'll show some worst case scenarios. You saw there at low getting down to mid-20s up to the 30s, but at 720p medium, it's going to come down a bit lower here, even 22, sometimes lower than that, and have trouble kind of coming back up from that when it comes to some of these heavier combat areas. It's just the nature of the beast. And when we go to 900p, performance will come a little bit lower than 720 at medium from time to time, but again, it is very similar performance when we compare that 720p medium to the 900p low in these areas. And there are other areas of combat as well that just get pretty heavy with a lot of enemies on screen, and this is again where 720p is low here. FSR2 quality 25 watts holds out okay, but again, a lot of heavy areas of the game like this, you're just going to be playing in the 20s no matter what you're doing with 720 or 900 or low or a mix of medium in there. Now if we switch over the same scene, 720p medium preset here, it's going to come down a little bit lower. We're going to see maybe 21, 22 in this one, I think, and it has a little bit more trouble recovering from there. And we'll go to 900p in the same spot back to low. Again, super similar performance to what we were getting at low with medium settings, but albeit a little lower, 19, and I saw some areas of the game later on at 17 FPS with 900p low. So it's just something to be aware of what we're seeing with performance. But those are heavier areas that I just wanted to show, kind of like worst case. A lot of areas of the game, even at 900p, will run a good bit better than that, especially the areas on the second planet, which is really gorgeous, by the way, one of my favorite areas of playing through the game, and it will run a good bit better, unlike that forest or beginning warzone area. When we get into a fight with buildings around and stuff like that, we'll more maintain in the 30s, sometimes even the 40s or 50s, depending on where we're at. I've even seen certain areas of the games at 720p get all the way up to around 60 FPS. So I do think there's definitely room for improvement when it comes to maybe the drivers, in-game frame gen, FSR3, and a lot of things that could help performance. Switching back over to 720p here gains us about 6 FPS over that 900p though on low, And I want to do some custom settings to kind of show you what I'm playing with here. I'm leaving texture medium, texture resolution medium, low on shadows, default for screen space, volumetrics low, effects low, details low, and then medium on the cloth. If I do this, we only lose about 2 FPS when it comes to 720p here with FSR2 quality, but it does a lot for the world, especially when you get into some other areas where it just looks a lot better having the screen space reflections and all that. Again, it doesn't hurt the performance that much, and it does look a lot better, especially if you're going to be using 720p. You can more get away with that than you can over on the 900p, and again at 1080. It's just not really worth trying to go that route. But with these settings in certain areas of the game, and especially this second planet area, combat looks good. It feels pretty good, and for the most part, it does try to stay a little bit higher up. But it looks great, a little bit better over the low. You get those medium textures, a little better lighting, shadows, and all that kind of stuff. So it works out pretty well. And the other areas of combat work out well here with the 720p and these custom settings as well, where it stays above the 30 FPS most of the time. But again, if you get into some of those other missions where there's just hordes of enemies coming on screen, or the foresty type areas, that's where we start coming back down into where we're like 20 to 30 FPS instead of that 30 to 40, 30 to 50, depending on where we're at. So this is kind of what we're looking at when it comes to Space Marine 2 performance here on the Ally X, and it's super similar to the performance that we see over on the Legion Go. Might be a little smoother here from time to time with the extra RAM, but this game's not super RAM heavy, but it is using up the resources and the hardware, and with these kind of handhelds trying to run a game like this, it can be quite difficult. But I do again think there's room for improvement when it comes to some newer drivers for the Ally. Again, I run everything official here, so I don't have anything side loaded. That could help. FSR 3 in the game with a game update and some in-game frame gen could really change the experience for Space Marine 2 here on devices like the Ally X or Legion Go. Alright guys, as always, thanks a lot for coming and check out the video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.